Interested in learning about wine, but not sure where to start? You're in the right place. Welcome to the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. I'm your host, Haley Bowman, and I'm so glad you're here. I'm a wine enthusiast turned wine educator and founder of the Seattle-based wine tasting business, Cork and Fizz. It is my goal to build your confidence in wine by making it approachable and lots of fun. You can expect to learn everything from how to describe your favorite wine to what to pair with dinner tonight, and so much more. Whether you're a casual wine sipper or a total cork dork like myself, this podcast is for you. So grab yourself a glass and let's dive in. Okay, let me know if this sounds familiar. You discover that you like a certain style of wine. For the sake of this example, let's say it's Pinot Noir. Perhaps you had it once at a friend's house, saw on the label that it was Pinot Noir, so from that point forward, you knew that you liked Pinot Noir. So now, when you go out to eat and you want a glass of wine, you look for a Pinot Noir. And when you're at the store, you head straight to the Pinot Noir section to grab a bottle because you know you like Pinot Noir. But you can see that there are different types of wine. There are other different types of wine. There's Cabernet Sauvignon, there's Merlot, Syrah, Grenache, Cabernet Franc, Mourvedre, Gamay. The list goes on. And that was just the start of the red wines. You want to try something else, but how will you know if you'll like it? Maybe it's just safer to stick with what you like. You'll stick with the Pinot Noir for now because you know you like it. That sound like you? Here's the thing. That used to be me. And it wasn't Pinot Noir, but it was Sauvignon Blanc. I had it at a friend of a family's house. Really, really enjoyed it and proceeded to buy it every time I went to the grocery store or always ordered that Sauvignon Blanc. That's all I drank. That is until I became interested in wine, of course. So if this sounds like you are going to love this episode because I'm here to help you discover new wines based on your current favorites. So I'll be recommending 2 new wines for you to try based off 6 of the most popular wine varieties. So I have a feeling, fingers crossed, that you fall under one of these styles of wine as being one of your favorites. So for the whites, we'll talk about alternatives for Sauvignon Blanc, Chardonnay, and Pinot Grigio. And for the reds, we'll talk about alternatives for Pinot Noir, Merlot, and Cabernet Sauvignon. This way, you'll have a place to start and you'll know just what to try when you are next shopping for a bottle of wine. But then you can also be fairly confident that you'll like the wine because it's similar to a style you already drink. Okay, let's start with the whites. We're going to start with the one that started it all for me, Sauvignon Blanc. Now, just to go over the basics of Sauvignon Blanc, this wine, it originated in France. It is now grown all over the world. I mean, in France, you have the Loire Valley and Bordeaux, but then you have New Zealand, Chile, South Africa, United States. It's pretty much everywhere now. When I think of Sauvignon Blanc, I think of a lighter bodied, and remember, body is like the weight of the wine. So how heavy does it feel in your mouth? So it's lighter bodied, higher acidity, and it always has this form of herbal and citrus note to it. It generally pairs well with lighter foods like salad, herbal sauces, poultry, and seafood. So that's the Sauvignon Blanc that I'm thinking of. So in terms of other wines you should try if you enjoy Sauvignon Blanc, if you like lighter bodied, high acidic wines, but you want something without that kind of herbal green flavor, you should try a wine called Albarino. Albarino, or Alvarinho, which is what it's called in Portugal, it has a V instead of the B sound, is from the Iberian Peninsula. That is where it originated. There's debates on whether it's Spain or Portugal, but hey, it's one of them. And that's where most of it is grown today as well. Though you do see it in Argentina, Chile, and the US some. As I mentioned, it is very acidic with a lighter body, just like Sauvignon Blanc. But flavor-wise, it's more mineral-y. And I know this term is a little hard to understand sometimes, but Think like the smell when you're walking by a waterfall of the water hitting the rocks, or like the smell of the pavement after it's just rained. So you're going to get a little bit more of that in this Albarino than you would a Sauvignon Blanc. Some would also say an Albarino can be a little salty, so like reminiscent of the ocean and seashells. And then you will have some fruit flavors in the Albarinos, things like lemon zest, melon, and tree fruit like nectarine or apricot. Albarino pairs wonderfully with any type of seafood. In fact, it's one of my go-tos for oysters, but it also is great with things like coconut shrimp or fish tacos. And the good news is that this wine is not very expensive, and you only need to spend like $15 to $20 for a good bottle of Albarino. If you go above that, you're going to be getting a great bottle. But if you're looking for kind of just entry level, give it a try. 15 to 20 will do you just fine. Okay, that's wine number one for our Sauvignon Blanc fan. So an Albarino, it's spelled Albarino with a little tilde over the end. So Albarino. The second option is a Gruner Veltliner. This is also light-bodied, high acidity, and it has both fruity and herbal notes. But the fruit notes are more tree fruit. So think like apple and pear versus the citrus that you'd find in Sauvignon Blanc. And then the herbalness is more known for this unique aroma of white pepper and some form of minerality, similar to our Albarino. If you're like me and you've never used white pepper before in your cooking and you're like, what the heck does white pepper even smell like? Here's what I've been told. So to me, white pepper smells like Gruner Veltliner because I've smelled Gruner Veltliner, and that's for sure the thing that I know the smell of. But if you want some other ideas, white pepper smells like fermented black pepper. So like a kombucha version or more acidic version of black pepper. I've also been told it can be a little barnyardy. So think like a little bit of funk. Like I was looking online and like a lot of people said that like white pepper can have a really strong aroma. So sometimes it can even go in the category of like manure. So like I don't want to say that to scare you off because like Gruner Veltliner does not smell like manure. Okay. So think like a less intense version if that's what came to mind for white pepper. All right. So Gruner Veltliner, it's a grape grown primarily in Austria, but you can find it in other countries, including Slovakia, Hungary, Italy, Germany, and the US. But most of it is in Austria. Similar to Albarino, Gruner Veltliner is great on the wallet. I found amazing bottles of Gruner Veltliner, especially Austrian Gruner Veltliner, for $20 or less, and they're really, really great quality. All right, so for your Sauvignon Blanc, your two wines to try are Albarino, primarily from Spain, or an Alvarinho from Portugal with the V instead of B, and a Gruner Veltliner, which is primarily grown in Austria. Again, that's where you're going to find it, but you could find it other places, but I'd recommend looking for that Austrian Gruner Veltliner. Okay, moving on to our second style of wine, let's talk Chardonnay. Chardonnay is grown all over the world, but it's believed that it originated in France. You may notice a pattern here as I go through a lot of these wines. The challenge with Chardonnay is that there are many different styles of Chardonnay. Anything from light-bodied and high acidic, almost like you could confuse it with a Sauvignon Blanc, to this rich, full-bodied, creamy style. So the alternatives to Chardonnay that I suggest today are similar in that you can find them in these different kinds of styles. So always be on the lookout when you're buying a bottle. Don't be afraid to ask questions about it so you know what style it is in. Now, going back to the Chardonnay real quick, some of the flavors that you would find in Chardonnay, one of the key ones that you'll find throughout all the different styles is going to be yellow apple. Beyond that, you can get all different kinds of aromas, anything from star fruit, pineapple, vanilla, butter, chalk, white flowers, pie crust, nutmeg, honeysuckle, and lemon curd. These can all come from different styles of Chardonnay, and they are all kind of dependent on how the winemaker decides to make the wine. Because the thing is, Chardonnay is a blank slate, so a lot of these flavors come from the winemaker. I also tend to associate Chardonnay with being this really delicious balance between tart and acidic flavors, along with that rich, more mouth-coating texture. So you get a little bit of both. So I kept that in mind as well when I was looking for some alternatives for Chardonnay fans. So our first wine to try, if you are a Chardonnay fan, is Chenin Blanc. Chenin Blanc, you better believe it, originated in France, most likely. but again has spread to many, many countries and is actually grown more in South Africa now than it is in France. Similar to Chardonnay, it has tree fruit notes of yellow apple and pear, but it also has this really lovely herbal kind of spicy note of like chamomile tea or ginger. And then it has this little sweet note of honey. Not to say that the wine is always sweet, but it does smell like honey a lot of the times. Chenin Blanc, just like Chardonnay, can be made in many styles. In France, they make super high acid, light bodied versions, but also rich, uber sweet. Like if you like dessert wine, you can find a Chenin Blanc made in a really nice dessert wine style. In South Africa, the most common style actually ends up being somewhere in between that like high acid, light bodied, and rich and sweet. They do something that's like medium bodied and off dry, meaning there's a little hint of sweetness in there. I found that Chenin Blanc can be a little more reliable in terms of quality than Chardonnay, just because it's less popular. So not as many people are making like a low quality bulk version, which makes it a good choice to try if you like Chardonnay. You may need to pay a little more for a good bottle. Again, not a lot of people are making this in bulk, so I'd look to spend about $25 to $30 on a bottle of Chenin Blanc. Okay, so for Chardonnay, you could try a Chenin Blanc or you could try a Roussanne. Roussanne, it's most commonly found in white wine blends in the Rhone Valley and Languedoc regions of France. This wine is generally medium-bodied with tree fruit. Remember that tree fruit? It's sticking around throughout all of these, along with some of those same spice herbal flavors of like chamomile that we found in Chenin Blanc. Now, what makes Roussanne different from both our Chenin and our Chardonnay, Roussanne is known for aromas. There's this yeasty aroma of like brioche, which I absolutely adore, along with like this kind of unique beeswax aroma. Now, this seems related to the honey, but trust me, two very different aromas. You'll know when you smell them. The other thing about Roussanne is it is known to have a slightly oily mouthfeel, and not to say that in a bad way. It's just kind of, it coats your mouth without feeling super, super rich. This is also found in other white wines from the Rhone Valley of France, like Viognier. Now, many producers in the US have taken to oaking the wine, aka they ferment it or age it in small oak barrels. So if you enjoy a good oaked Chardonnay, you should try a Roussanne from the US because it'll have that nice oak characteristic that you enjoy. Now, if you prefer an unoaked Chardonnay, try a Roussanne from France. These are going to be much higher acidity, very bright, but still that medium body, just to give you that good balance. Price-wise, you could probably find a good one from France anywhere between $20 to $30. From the US, you're probably going to spend a little bit more. One reason being that they use the oak on it, and that costs a little bit more. So you're probably looking around $40 for a bottle of Roussanne here in the US. Okay, so if you are a Chardonnay fan, the two wines for you to try are a Chenin Blanc or a Roussanne. But again, be sure to ask questions about the wine when you're buying it because they are made in so many different styles. Okay, our last white wine that we're going to talk about is our good old friend Pinot Grigio, or Pinot Gris as they call it in France. It's the same thing, so if you see anything Pinot Grigio or Pinot Gris, which is Gris, they are the same grape. It's just a different name for it, whether it's France or Italy. This wine originated in, let's say it together now, France, but is now grown pretty much everywhere. And in my opinion, I think some of the best ones are coming out of Italy these days. This wine for me generally falls under the category of a porch pounder or a crowd pleaser. There are a lot of bulk wines made in Pinot Grigio or made out of Pinot Grigio, and it can be a little hard to find like a remarkable, really great Pinot Grigio, but it's also like they're never that bad. I don't know. That's my opinion. You might differ from that, and that's fine, but I think they kind of fall into that category. So I tried to find some other wines that were a little more interesting, but also fell in like that crowd pleaser category. Flavor-wise, you can get anything from peach, lemon zest, melon, some almonds, and mostly like raw almonds. So they're not toasted here. It's a little bit more of that kind of bitter note. And then again, that minerality pops up again. Usually light to medium bodied with a medium to high level of acidity. So, right, you're kind of hearing this like middle of the road. Again, that's what makes it such a great crowd pleaser. The wine pairs great with white meat, especially those with like a fruit component. So like a sauce or some type of compote. made out of like lemons, oranges, or apricots. The Pinot Grigio is going to love that. Okay, so if you are a Pinot Grigio fan and you want to try something new, the first wine I'm going to recommend to you is called Savoy. It is Savoie, and that is the region that I'm talking about. So this is a French wine, and the region is called Savoy, which means the wine is called Savoy. This is Savoie, and the grapes in this are Jacquère and Altesse, along with, I think they can put 3 other ones, but those are going to be your top 2. Similar to Pinot Grigio, I'd consider this wine a crowd pleaser. It's not too acidic, but also not like flabby. It's not too light-bodied, but it's also not too rich. It's like that happy medium. It has fruity flavors of pear, grapefruit, peach, and pineapple, but there's also some of this unique floral and, again, that mineral note in there. This wine, again, will be labeled by the region. So look for a wine labeled Savoy AOC. You're probably not going to see Jacquère or Altesse on the label anywhere. Good news, though, this wine is very affordable, though potentially a little harder to find. So you might have to hit up a couple small wine shops. You could probably get a good bottle between $12 to $20. So stock up on these. All right, so if you like Pinot Grigio, one option is at Savoy. The next option is Torrontés. And this is one of the first ones we've come up to that does not originate in France. This is one of the only well-known grapes that is native to Argentina. This wine, it's light to medium-bodied, low to medium acidity. So if you're not a fan of that sharpness and you tend to reach towards Pinot Grigios that are less acidic, check out a Torrontés. It has fruity notes of lemon, peach, and orange, but rather than that almond and mineral note in Pinot Grigio, it goes more floral. So if you like Gewürztraminer, this is also another one that you're going to enjoy. It is also known for smelling far sweeter than it tastes, okay? So give it a chance after you've had given it a little sniff. You really won't find this grown anywhere besides Argentina, and I would say you could expect to pay around $15 for a good bottle. So for our Pinot Grigio fans, you are going to look for a Savoy and a Torrontés to try. Do you ever find yourself standing in front of the wine aisle at the grocery store, feeling completely lost and overwhelmed? Don't worry, you're not alone. But what if I told you that I have a way to transform the wine aisle from overwhelming into an endless sea of joy and discovery? And it involves drinking wine and joining the most welcoming and fun community. In my Court Crew Virtual Tasting Club, we're all about exploring new and exciting wines in a fun and supportive community. No more feeling intimidated or stuck in a rut of buying the same bottle of wine. Each month, we explore 2 new wines so you can broaden your palate and explore new flavors. Not only will we taste these wines together, but we'll learn about where the wines come from, essentially traveling the world all through the wine in our glass. Come join the Court Crew and you'll have the opportunity to taste new wines, meet winemakers and other wine professionals, and connect with like-minded wine lovers from all over the world. Imagine the joy of discovering a new favorite wine and being able to confidently choose a bottle that you know you'll love. So, why not join us? Head to my website at corkandfizz.com/thecourtcrew to sign up. And don't forget to use code WINE101 to get your first month free. And now, back to the show. Okay, now on to our red wines. Let's start with a Pinot Noir. When I think Pinot Noir, I think a lighter bodied red, something with not a lot of tannin in it. Remember, tannin is what makes your mouth feel really dry, almost like you had a cotton ball in it. And it's a little bit earthier, like there's still fruit in there, but there's also like an earthy component in a Pinot Noir. So, big surprise, this grape originated in France and it is now grown all over the world, right? So surprising here. So you'll find a lot of red fruit, things like cherry, raspberry, cranberry, but you're also going to find some spice notes like clove and allspice and vanilla, and then those earthy components. So anything from mushroom, wet leaves, and potting soil can come up as an aroma when you're smelling Pinot Noir. This wine is light to medium bodied, medium to high acidity, and pretty low tannins usually. It is a great wine for pairing with food. When you're not sure what to have with dinner, a lot of the time you can throw a Pinot Noir in and it works just fine. Okay, now, if you are a Pinot Noir fan and you want to try something new, here are the wines that I'd recommend for you. My first recommendation is a grape called Gamay, also originating in France, and actually the region most famous for Gamay, which is called Beaujolais, is just south of Burgundy, which is the homeland of Pinot Noir. So they're grown in very similar regions. Similar to Pinot Noir, Gamay is a light-bodied, low tannin, and high acidity wine. Flavor-wise, Gamay is usually a little fruitier than a Pinot Noir. So if you're not as big into the earthy components, check out a Gamay for sure. You'll find notes of pomegranate, blackberry, and sometimes even banana, which we'll get to that. We'll talk about that flavor in a second. Earth-wise, there can be some notes of potting soil, but it tends to go more floral than like that mushroom wet leaves that you'd find in Pinot Noir. One thing that sets Gamay apart from Pinot Noir is that winemakers often use a process called carbonic maceration when they're making Gamay. I really should have a whole podcast episode on this. Really what I should do is invite a winemaker to talk about carbonic maceration, because honestly, it's still something that I don't fully understand. But the basics of it is that the grapes, so normally when you're making red wine, you're going to press the grapes to get the juice, and then you're going to, you'll let the grapes the skin sit with the juice while it's fermenting a little bit, but you generally press the grapes first to get the juice. With carbonic maceration, you do not do that. You leave the grapes whole, then you put them in a sealed or a mostly sealed tank and let the fermentation process happen inside the grapes, which is really cool. And then eventually the weight of the grapes causes them to burst and like kind of push down. And it's essentially like the grapes are pressing themselves, kind of. And so this process can produce really unique flavors, things like banana, bubblegum. And for me personally, whenever I try a red wine made from this carbonic maceration, I get flavors like root beer and Coca-Cola. Maybe it's like the anise or like black licorice, but to me, yeah, they always get this like kind of soda flavor to them, which is very unique. Gamay itself, also another great food wine. You will find some wines labeled Gamay, but my other recommendation is to look for wines labeled by that region I mentioned, Beaujolais, which looks nothing like how I'm saying it right now. It is Beaujolais. So look for that on a label, and that is a good wine to try if you enjoy Pinot Noir. The next recommendation for our Pinot Noir lovers comes from the Italian island of Sicily, and specifically from the slopes of the volcano on that island, Mount Etna. This wine is called Etna Rosso, and it's usually a blend of grapes, but Nerello Mascalese is the most well-known. Like Pinot Noir, this wine is lighter bodied with high acidity, and again, lower tannin levels, though out of the three, like the Pinot Noir Gamay and this Etna Rosso, this one is probably the most tannic. Flavor-wise, there will be some fruit, like cherry, a little bit of orange, and also some herbal and earthy notes. Think like thyme, mineral, like crushed gravel, and then a little bit of spice as well with allspice. This wine was an absolute favorite in one of the Court Crew tastings that I did a few months ago. So as a reminder, we taste, in my Court Crew virtual tasting club, we taste 2 new wines every month. And so a couple of months ago, we did a deep dive into Etna. So we tried the red and the white wine from the Etna region in Sicily. And I think there were like 10 of us on the call for this one, and every single person loved the Etna Rosso. And I don't think that's happened with any other style of wine that we've done. Almost always there's somebody that's just like not quite a fan, or at least a few people who aren't a fan of the wine, which is totally normal. You're not meant to like every wine, but Etna Rosso was like a favorite for everyone. So definitely recommend giving it a try. You won't find this wine labeled by the grape again, which was Nerello Mascalese. So look for an Etna Rosso. Good bottles, I can usually find them. I've had great bottles at $20 and great bottles at $35. So you don't have to spend a lot, but you could, I guess, is where that's going. All right, so for Pinot Noir fans, your 2 grapes to try are going to be Gamay and then the grape Nerello Mascalese, which is made into an Etna Rosso. So you're going to look for Etna Rosso. All right, now moving on to our second red, good old Merlot. This poor wine was given such a bad reputation thanks to a certain movie, Sideways, but it's actually a very delicious wine. This wine, again, originated in France, is made all across the world. It's known for flavors and aromas of cherry, plum, chocolate, dried herbs, vanilla, leather, cedar, boysenberry, violet, mint, and so many more. This is really a powerful, complex wine. It deserves way better attention than it has. It's medium, like medium plus, so somewhere between medium to full body, and then medium to high tannin and alcohol with lower acidity levels. It's a great blending grape that works really well with Cabernet Franc and Cabernet Sauvignon. It tastes delicious paired with roasted foods, anything from a roasted pork shoulder to roasted mushrooms. Now, for alternatives, if you are a Merlot lover and you have not let that bad reputation stop you, here are some wines for you to try. The first one is Malbec. If you love Merlot for its fruitiness, try a Malbec. I lovingly refer to this wine as a fruit bomb. It is one of the favorites of some of the people in that wine club that I started with friends a few years ago. Think of Malbec as like a more intense version of Merlot. It's fuller in body and usually has more alcohol, though general equal amounts of tannin and acidity. Flavor-wise, you're going to get that same plum, blackberry, and chocolate that you'd find in a Merlot, but more uniquely, this one has a little more vanilla. They usually use a little more oak with a Malbec, and then it has this sweet tobacco note. And again, this is an aroma, not a flavor. Malbec is grown primarily in Argentina, but has now spread across the world, and it actually originated in France, though there's very, very little Malbec left in France. It's known as Côte in France, C-O-T. Argentina has the best pricing on Malbec, so check there first if you want to give this a try. You can find a great one for like $15. Okay, so if you like Merlot, you could try a Malbec, or you could try a wine that I actually just recently tried for the first time called Valpolicella. Valpolicella is the region in Italy, and the wine itself is made out of a blend of local grapes. The most famous version of Valpolicella is Amarone della Valpolicella, which is made from dried grapes. But that's not quite the style that I'd recommend for Merlot lovers. That's going to be a little more rich, maybe more for the port fans. If you're a Merlot fan, you should try Valpolicella Superiore Ripasso. So it's basically like Valpolicella Superior, just the Italian version, Ripasso. Okay, it looks like how it sounds, I promise. This version of Valpolicella is made with higher quality grapes. That's what the Superiore means. But then it's blended with leftover grape must, which is essentially the kind of like the skins for the most part. So those dried grapes, the skins of those, and a little bit of the juice, blended with a leftover grape must of the Amarone wine, which is the Ripasso part of the name. So it's basically kind of like think like best of both worlds in this scenario. So it's not too rich. It has that nice acidity from just the regular grapes, but good quality. But then you get a little bit of that richness from the must of the Amarone wines. Flavor-wise, we're going to get more into like a cherry sauce. So it's a little bit reduced, a little bit more intense in flavor, blackberry and chocolate, and then a little bit of an herbal note of peppercorn. It's medium-bodied, medium tannin, more acidity than a Merlot is the only thing to keep in mind here for the Valpolicella. And price-wise, it is a little bit more of a splurge. I can't remember how much I paid for the bottle I had, but from what I could tell, you'll probably have to spend about $30 to get a good bottle of that Valpolicella Superiore Ripasso, which is what I'd recommend, along with a Malbec for our Merlot lovers. All right, and we're on to our final wine. And of course, we're going to have to talk about Cabernet Sauvignon, the number one grape in the world. Cabernet Sauvignon originated in France, but of course, we know it's grown pretty much everywhere now. It is loved for its full body, high tannin structure. It has flavors of black cherry, currant, cedar, baking spices, graphite, fig, tobacco, chocolate, and mint. It is often aged in new oak to make it a little more smooth, and then that's what adds in that baking spice flavor. So if you like Cabernet Sauvignon, if that is your go-to, the first recommendation I have for you is Tempranillo. This is the main grape behind Spanish Rioja. The flavors of this, you're going to get cherry, fig, cedar, tobacco, and dill. Structure-wise, it's going to be medium plus bodied, so medium to full bodied. You can find some that are a little richer, but it might not be quite as big as a Cabernet. You're going to have medium plus tannin and medium plus alcohol and acidity. So like, again, it is very well structured and a very big wine. They're almost always aged in oak. So this adds the notes of vanilla, baking spices, coconut. And then if you heard me say dill earlier, you did hear me say dill. That actually comes from the new oak with the Tempranillo. Kind of crazy, right? Now, Rioja is a cool one. If you like aged Cabernet Sauvignon, but you don't like spending a lot of money for aged Cabernet Sauvignon, try Rioja. You can get, so Rioja comes in different levels. There's like the Rioja, which is just basic. Then you have Rioja Reserva. And then I'm drawing a blank on what the last one is, but there's different levels. And you could easily get a like 10-year-old Rioja Reserva, probably $30 to $40. So you don't need to be spending quite as much as you would for those high-end Cabernets. So definitely check that out. And then Tempranillo is also a grape that has been growing really well in Texas. So if you want to try something and you're a Cab fan, try a Texas Tempranillo. All right, so our other wine, if you are a Cabernet fan that you should try, is Nero de Avola. We're actually heading back to that island of Sicily where our Etna Rosso was found for Nero de Avola. I didn't actually mean to have two from the same little island, but they're just such perfect fits I had to talk about them. So if you like Cabernet, you'll love Nero de Avola. It's full-bodied, medium plus tannin and alcohol. You got notes of black cherry, tobacco, plum, but then uniquely, this one has a little spice element to it of chili pepper, and then a little bit of that black licorice flavor. You will definitely be spending less for a good Nero de Avola than you would a Cabernet. Good bottles priced at starting just around $15. So you do not have to spend a lot for this one. So again, if you are a Cabernet lover, some wines for you to try would be a Tempranillo. Specifically, it could be a Rioja from Spain or a Nero de Avola, which is from Italy. All right, and there you have it. Those are your alternatives to try. I really hope you go out there and pick up one of these wines based off one of your favorites. If you do, please let me know. Tag me on social media. I'm at Cork and Fizz, or send me an email, haley@corkandfizz.com. If you love this episode as much as I did, I would so appreciate it if you could take a quick second, rate it, and leave a review. If you've already done that, feel free to take a screenshot of your page right now or find the upload button and share this on social media so that you can let other people know to come check out the Cork and Fizz Guide to Wine podcast. In next week's episode, I'll be interviewing Sarah and Nate Walsh of Walsh Family Vineyards in Virginia. Yes, I said Virginia. I can't wait for you to meet these two. I love what they're doing both in making wine and in supporting and helping the wine community in Virginia grow. Thanks again for listening, and as a thank you, I'd like to share my free shopping guide, 15 wines under $15. Simply head to my website, corkandfizz.com, scroll down to the bottom, and join my mailing list. Cheers!